Welcome. I'm Steph, an intuitive hypnotist from Quebec, Canada.
I'm Julie, a past life regression hypnotist and Reiki healer from Wisconsin.
And together, we are the Soulful Mystics.
Hi, Julie.
Hi, Steph.
I am excited to hear about your spiritual awakening experience. What would you say your stage in life was when you started noticing this awakening, or as you notice it today?
I would say it started back in August of 2019. During that time, I was in a very toxic situation at work, just dealing with a lot of toxic behavior from my supervisor. I was just constantly feeling stressed out all the time. Leading up to that point in my life, I was helping take care of my grandma who was battling cancer. And then in 2017, she passed away. Up to that point, my husband had a lot of back issues. He had a major surgery. I had my own issues. I had some trouble with my neck, just dealing with a lot of things that seemed like they were piling up. Very stressed. I was working overtime for years, which was good for the medical bill, but it was very taxing on me personally. That's kind of what was leading up to August 2019. At that point in my life, I noticed work was weighing on me the most just because I spent so much time working, dealing with the toxicity from my supervisor, being the type of person that tries to help others and being on a team of people who are all feeling that and me trying to help them. You know what I mean? I want them to feel better about being at work. During all of that, it just really started to weigh on me. I was going home feeling very negative, having a bad attitude, and I was bringing it home. I just decided one day, and I don't remember exactly how this went down, but I just knew that something needed to change. I needed to do something about the amount of stress I was carrying because that's what contributed to a lot of my neck issues. I would get stressed and I could just feel all the knots in my neck and my back and my shoulders. It would get so bad that I couldn't move my head from side to side. It was just awful. I think it kind of started because I was trying to manage the stress. So I decided, okay, maybe during my lunch break, I'm going to try to meditate. I have a very scattered brain. Even now, I have a very scattered brain. I'm always all over the place. I had thought of meditation before, but the idea of meditating, there was no way. There's no way I can do this. I tried it and I would get very, very bored with it.
Yeah.
But one day, I don't know, something just changed where I remember sitting down on my lunch break. I put on some headphones and I was listening to binaural beats. Maybe did it for like 10 minutes. And all of a sudden, I start seeing all these colors kind of coming in and out and all over. And then that's kind of what got me interested in meditation because I was trying to figure out what was going on. And being as this was in the very beginning of my spiritual path, I had no idea of setting intentions or what type of guided meditations to look for, or I had no idea. I was just doing my own thing, I guess. At the same time I began meditating in August of 2019, I also was trying to be more mindful about the way I spoke about myself. I'm someone who jokes all the time, constantly joking. But with that, I was constantly putting myself down in a joking manner. And I won't even repeat the things I used to say to myself or out loud to other people. I can't do that now.
Yeah.
I'm much more careful about it now. And I think back then I just realized I'm not being nice to myself. I'm not treating myself very well. No wonder I'm feeling the way I'm feeling.
Yeah. I know you just mentioned setting intentions, and being kind to yourself is one thing that we spoke about in the last podcast. It is so important. But recently you posted with your Soul Seeker hypnosis page about intentions, and that really sparked something for me because I struggle with setting intentions even now. And so what would you say, any advice or any suggestions or what you used in the beginning on how you set intentions? Do you have any advice on that?
I feel like I'm kind of just learning the importance of intention setting. My post was about the intentions that we set for the past life regression, the divine guidance sessions that we offer. And the whole idea behind that is to set the tone for what that session is going to be like. Well, it's the same thing in meditation if you want to set an intention. Some people like to just wake up and set an intention for their day. I'm going to be really productive today, or, I'm just going to rest and relax and give my body the rest that it needs. I think an intention can be anything, but of course it's going to be up to the individual. Back then in the beginning, I had no idea about any of that stuff. But I would say now that I'm about 3.5 years in, I am a little bit more intentional. Am I going to focus on grounding or energy cleansing or releasing? So usually my intentions are kind of aimed in that direction. Yeah.
I do need to work on that for sure. But it is something like I was really happy to see your post about that because it made me realize that setting the intention is one thing, but writing it down or talking about it with somebody else, especially with a hypnosis session, and seeing or experiencing through that session. So what would you say happened next in August 2019? Like you were still experiencing your neck pain. Was there anything else that started sticking out, like any signs and synchronicities that started happening at that time?
I noticed the repeating numbers 111, 333, 222, 1111. I was seeing all of them, still do. I still see all of those numbers, but that was when it really stood out to me. I was doing the meditation, I was doing affirmations, I kept a gratitude journal back then. I was being more mindful about what I was saying about myself, even though it was very hard. Back then, even saying affirmations felt like a lie because I wasn't used to speaking to in a kind manner. That was August 2019. By October 2019, so 2 months later, is when I started to experience severe headache. One afternoon, I remember it was a Saturday, I started to get a tension headache in the back of my neck and shoulders. And that was nothing new. I experienced that all the time because I carried the stress in my shoulders. It was always tense, always getting knots. I thought that's what this was. No matter what I did, the headache wouldn't go away. A couple days later, I still had it, except now it's starting to move on the left side of my head. As time went on, this headache got worse and worse. It moved into the whole entire left side of my head, my face, my shoulders. It was excruciating pain. I went to sleep with it. I woke up with it. It never went away. I went to a doctor and they kept telling me, well, you're just having migraines. Everybody's experience with migraines is different, but I've had them before and it was never anything like this. And they always went away. 3 weeks in, it's still there. I ended up having this headache for an entire year. As I was dealing with the headaches and I'm starting to meditate and I'm getting into all of this stuff, I changed what I was exposing myself to, meaning the TV, movies, what I was watching, what I was listening to. I was a true crime junkie. I constantly listened to nothing but true crime. All of my podcasts or true crime all day long. While I worked, I would listen to that. Or while I'm at home doing chores, cooking, cleaning, whatever, I'm listening to that. And that's really heavy stuff. One night I decided, I'm going to listen to something different. I love Chelsea Handler. I know she's not for everybody, but I love her. I found a podcast. I believe it was called Life Will Be the Death of Me. Her podcast is named after her book. In it, she would talk about her own healing journey, how she started going to therapy. She read these books by Laura Lynn Jackson. She's a psychic medium. She's famous. She's been on TV. Chelsea Handler was talking about how she read these books, and I think she might have interviewed her. I'm not quite sure. It's all about, obviously, the life between us is her journey to recognizing her gifts and accepting the gifts that she had. Then signs, the secret language of the universe, that is basically different stories of people's signs that they received from the other side and stories like that. I read these books because it immediately sparked interest once Chelsea started talking about these. I'm going to go to work. I'm going to I'm going to ask for a sign. And the first thing I asked for was a yellow butterfly. My grandma, the one who had cancer and passed away, her favorite color was yellow. Whenever I see these little yellow butterflies, for whatever reason, after she passed away, I instantly thought of her. She always popped into my head. So I was like, okay, I'm going to ask for a yellow butterfly. During this time in October 2019, I was working a second job cleaning at a clinic here in town. I remember I walked into the children's clinic. I see butterflies everywhere. It's a children's clinic, so there's like decals on the window and things like that. And I was like, wait a minute, I've never noticed these before until that one night. And I'm cleaning the toys, and I go to put some books away, and there is a yellow butterfly on the cover of this book. Hey, this is pretty cool. And I just remember all throughout cleaning the children's clinic, I kept finding more and more butterflies. I even started to see red cardinals, and I know that's kind of the universal sign. My great grandmother, her favorite bird was cardinals. Everything in her house, like little knickknacks and stuff, cardinal. She loved cardinals for almost 20 years now. When I see a red cardinal, that's who I think of. And so I started to see both, and I was like, okay, both at the same time. Okay, my grandmothers are with me. I know that. And so that was really when I think my whole mind just started to open up. And throughout that time, I mean, I'm talking like throughout the next year, I just listened to as many podcasts as I could. That's when I found Gina's podcast, Past Lives and the Divine. It was right in the very beginning of my, I guess, awakening, but at the time I had no idea what was going on. I listened to spirit speakers, psychic teachers. I think my mind was just blown, like, oh my gosh, there's people talking about all this stuff. And like, I just remember being so fascinated by it, by psychics and mediums and everything. I want to fast forward us like a year into this story, because this is like, I know it's long. I'm on TikTok one day. I come across this TikTok of this girl talking about the Akashic Records. I had never heard of the Akashic Records. She was saying that Neil from Global Akasha was just amazing. He was so accurate about answering her questions, on and on about how amazing this reading was. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to do it. I have no idea what this is. I read through his website, very, very thorough with how it works and the questions and the types of things you can ask and everything. So I wrote my questions. I set up an appointment with him, and we have our reading. And this was when everything changed for me. If I didn't live through what I'm about to tell you, I never would believe this.
Yeah.
So I'm being vulnerable. Putting this out there. During this reading, my number one question was, what is causing this headache? I've had this headache for 1 year, an entire year. At this point, we're in October 2020. I was at my wit's end. Nothing I did, the medication the doctors put me on, nothing was relieving this headache. I had gone to an energy healer prior to this and did craniosacral therapy and Reiki. This was the first time I was exposed to Reiki. She is the only person that was able to give me any relief. She made it to where I would wake up without a headache, and then it would come later in the day. And that was the first time I was ever able to get any relief from this pain at all. I knew there was something to this Reiki, and I knew there was something to the craniosacral therapy, and it just made me more curious about that. We're a year forward now. We're talking about my headache in this reading because that was my number one question. What do I do about this headache? It started off and he was like, well, just my personal experience, cream of tartar works great. And I was like, oh crap, this isn't what I was hoping for. I really wanted true answers, not how to relieve the pain, what's behind it. And so I was a little disappointed. But then we went on with the reading. All of a sudden, my spirit guide just kind of takes over. He's telling me this, and I'm like, okay, I'm so shocked because I wasn't prepared for him to talk to me so much about my spirit guide, I guess. I was curious about it, but I was in a great deal of pain. I was very much so taken aback. He told me that I have mediumship abilities. I was like, you're nuts. I never would have thought that about myself. Never, ever, ever. He's like, if you're willing, I teach mediumship. I can take you through some exercises. Okay, cool. Yeah, let's do it. He begins to take me on an exercise and then he stops and he's like, oh no, your guide doesn't want me to do that. He wants me to do a more advanced exercise. I don't do this with beginners. And so I was like, okay, well, I don't know if it'll work, but let's do it. He basically took me on a 5-minute guided meditation where I met my grandmother and my dog, China, my little pug who had passed away a couple years prior, on a bridge. So they're on one end, I'm on the other, and we meet in the middle. I could see everything as clear as day. I was completely blown away. And I think what was even more interesting for me at the time, being my first reading, having to do anything with this, he was seeing everything that I was seeing. And at the time, sight was the only sense. So I wasn't picking up on any messages. I was just a really happy reunion with my grandma and my dog. And I remember my dog like jumping on me, and he could see that my dog was jumping on me. After we finished that, he was like, wow, you are very gifted. And I was so taken aback. I was like, there's no way. I don't know how to explain that. It was just crazy. Then he's like, okay, your guide wants to do another exercise. And at this time, he's like, okay, put your hands in the praying position. So I did, and I'm sitting in front of him. Or he asked me, your guide has this ribbon or whatever. What color is it? Oh, it's blue. I don't know. I just knew it was blue. And I wasn't seeing what was happening, but I just then he's like, yeah, okay, you're right. I'm in the prayer position. My guide is going around me with the ribbon, tying the ribbon like around my hands. I don't know what he did some kind of blessing on me. And he's like, there, that should help with your headache. You're going through a spiritual awakening. This awakening is what's causing your headaches. You're starting to open. Your gifts are starting to open up. And that was the second time I was told that. And I didn't even realize it, because way back when I went to have the cranial sacral therapy and the Reiki done, the first thing she said to me was, I wonder if your gifts are starting to open. That right there, 1 year apart, totally validated that whole experience. I tell you what, I woke up the next day and I didn't have a headache, and the headache never came back.
That's amazing.
That is amazing. And I get chills when I say that. I would never believe that if I didn't live through it, if I didn't experience it. It's insane.
And it's true. The things that we live through the spiritual awakening make us believe, number one, in that experience itself, but also in the experience of others. Like, I have zero doubt that this shift definitely relieve those headaches, because the headaches were consistent, probably because you weren't listening to the signs. And until you found the right person to make you believe in it and to go for your gifts, it was going to keep going. And I think that was your moment, right? And the fact that you had the first one. So the 2 in a row within a year really made you a believer. And so it sucks that it took a year. A year of headaches is... I had 14 days of a headache and migraine, and I don't know how you did it for a year with a family. I just don't get it.
I don't know how I did it either. To be honest, I look back on it now, I don't even know how I survived. I've never experienced such intense pain in my entire life, every single day with no relief for 1 year.
That's insane. That's torture. And it is a lot of what the spiritual awakening does, is it reacts within your body. And for you, it was your head. You need your head for pretty much everything. I'm really glad that you found some relief, but I'm sorry it took a year.
That was the turning point. I mean, that was when I realized, or I guess I accepted and believed, that what I have been going through was a spiritual awakening. During that whole year, and even after, I mean, I would say even up until recently, I've felt so lost, so stuck. I had no direction in my life. I spent so much time really researching, listening to people talk on podcasts, watching documentaries, just everything I could about psychic mediums and spiritual awakenings and all of this stuff. I started taking a meditation class and I went to my first Reiki share during this time before I even went through the Reiki training. For so long, it just that feeling of being lost. The other biggest thing with me was not knowing who I was. For so many years, I was taking care of other people. I never really got to focus on myself or get to know myself. I grew up with a narcissistic stepmother, and I learned through all of this why I behave the way I do in certain situations, why I'm so agreeable to everything, even if it's maybe not what I want or not what I want to do, not what I want to eat, but I just agree to keep the peace, even though the people in my life now don't see it that way because it's not even an issue. When you grow up around a narcissist, you're constantly walking on eggshells. Nothing you do is good enough. I'm unlearning those beliefs. About a year ago is when I started my Reiki training. That was so therapeutic for me. I think once I took my first Reiki training was when I really felt like I was starting to heal. When you go through Reiki, you get what's called an attunement, and basically the Reiki master is passing on that Reiki energy onto you. There's a 21-day period where you're supposed to do 21 days of Reiki self-healing. I would have these amazing experiences when I would do this healing. It was so beautiful. I would go to what I refer to now as my healing place. It started off where it was a little pond. I would just see a pond. Every time I would do this self-healing, the whole image of this pond would evolve. And I would see more and more and more. I would get other signs, like sometimes I would see Buddha. I would see flowers, and I would see myself laying in this pond. And as I would go to each chakra, a flower like a lotus, like blooming. It was so vivid. At one point during this 21-day period, I was like, how come I can only see one chakra at a time? Why can't I get this full image? As soon as I had that thought, the image like zoomed out so I could see the whole picture, zoomed right back into the chakra that I was focusing on. It was so interesting because then I could see myself laying in this pond, all of my chakras. Gosh, just reflecting back on it, I haven't had experiences so vivid since I went through this Reiki training. It was amazing. And I think that's really when my gift kind of started to open. And I kind of feel like I've been in like an open, close kind of a situation since then, as I'm getting used to it and learning how to use them and recognize them and all of that. I think my Reiki training was just like another turning point in my awakening. And it really helped too that my Reiki teacher, Abby, she was so involved. We would meet on a regular basis. If I had anything I wanted to talk about, I could text her, I could call her. Like, she was so there for me. And now she's such a great friend. I just remember being in such like a deep depression during this time too, which sounds weird because I was having all these amazing experiences. But I think going through COVID and isolation and all of that, like I was already in a depression. And by the time I started Reiki training, I was trying to dig myself out of that. And this really truly helped me because so much stuff came up from my childhood. The narcissistic stepmother that I talked about, I had to do a lot of healing. This really made me do it. It just made me face it. After I did my first Reiki training, a couple of months later, I did Reiki 2. I think there's a lot of trainings that do 1 and 2 in just a weekend, but this was such like an in-depth process with my teacher. Each time we did a training, it was the 21 days after the attunement. The same thing, I did the 21 days of self-healing after my Reiki 2 attunement, and the whole experience was so different. Reiki 1 was really hard. It opened me up. I had a lot of amazing experiences on a daily basis, but I really had to face the stuff I needed to heal. Reiki 2, I was in such a better place after dealing with all that stuff I was holding in. It was so much more peaceful and it was more beautiful. I still would have that evolving image of me healing myself in this healing pond, and I would see mountains in the background. I would see flowers. I would see deer and animals and birds. And every time I would do this healing each day, it was a different experience. It was the same place, but it would just evolve. It would like this whole image would just bloom in my head. That was pretty awesome going through that. And then I went through a period of fear.
Yeah.
Okay, now I have this gift of Reiki, but I'm terrified to use it. And the imposter syndrome kicks in. I really didn't want to just do Reiki in person. I didn't know, like, am I going to do Reiki at all? I don't know. I feel like there's been times where I just go without thinking about it, talking about it, and then it pops back up and then I'm using it. It was such a time of fear, of judgment, or what if I don't know what I'm doing, or what if it's not working? I just had so much doubt and fear. And then one day I ran into Lisa, the energy healer that did the cranial sacral therapy for me. And we started talking, and she was telling me about a Reiki circle that she went to and said, oh yeah, you should come to these. They'd be really, really good. I started going to these circles and loved it. I don't want to say that it was like practice, but it was exposure to the hands-on. Besides just doing it on myself, it was exposure to hands-on because I didn't have anyone that I could use Reiki with because no one in my family is into that, and really have anyone around me that I was talking to about this because I was very hush-hush about everything I was going through for the longest time. I wouldn't even talk to my husband about it. Now it's a different story because we have the most amazing conversations. But back then, I was so afraid to tell anyone what I was going through. And that's very isolating too.
For sure.
Yeah, I started doing these Reiki shares. They were about once a month or once every few weeks. I noticed more and more started to open up for me. Probably the most fascinating experience I had was always open up with ritual, and then we would do a quick self-healing. And when I got to my third eye, it had just completely lit up blue. I remember thinking, oh, that's cool. That's never happened before. It just like lit up this blue color. And I was like, holy shit, that's cool. Okay, didn't think anything of it. We get into the circle, and there was an older lady on the table. I think I was just working on her shoulder, sunk into this deep meditative state so quickly. I don't know what it's like for you, but when I get like that, I just get to a space where suddenly there's a shift and I'm not in my head anymore. I'm like up here above my head. I don't know if that makes any sense, but that's how I describe it.
Yeah.
I see two Native American spirit guides that I had seen flashes of before, but I didn't know, what is this image I'm getting? Are these my guides? One was a shaman, the other was a chief. And that's how they're dressed. As we're doing the Reiki and I see them, then I notice two others on my side. One man that I was familiar with, who is Johnny, and then a little fairy, who is Joy. They're at my shoulders, and the two Native American spirit guides are in front of me. And I literally had this thought, hey, what are you guys doing here? The image changed to an elderly man from the shoulders up. I just see it like this photo is what it looked like, of an elderly man start to like develop in my mind. As soon as I realized like, oh, okay, this is a person that I've never seen before. And then I was like, oh, this is a person I've never seen before. In my head, I kind of gave it permission. I said, okay, go ahead. I welcomed him because I figured my guides were there for a reason. So I figured they were probably bringing him in. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to go with this. I see this picture. I could tell he was wearing like a white collared shirt with like a tan sweater over it. I remember seeing the wrinkles in his face, specifically around his chin. And he had dark framed glasses, like black framed glasses, and white hair. And I didn't get any messages. I just see this image. Then my brain goes to, okay, what am I supposed to do with this? There's got to be a reason I'm seeing him. Then another picture pops up next to him. So I see him on one side in my mind. Then there's like an 8x10 photo. It's black and white, and it's of a young man in an Air Force uniform. He's got the hat on, everything. I'm looking at this photo and I'm thinking, this has got to be him. Maybe this is just some kind of validation or something. It was the most amazing experience just seeing this and letting it all unfold in my mind. Meanwhile, we're only, we're in a Reiki share. So it's like each person gets 10 minutes. So this is happening in such a short period of time. When we're finished, I remember saying to my guides, like, okay, if I'm supposed to say something about what I just experienced, just make the word. They just need to fly out because I don't even know how to approach this. The lady gets off the table and she's there with her daughter, and this was her first time experiencing Reiki too. And she says, wow, that was really cool. I just kept feeling like my father was with me. And then all of a sudden it's like word vomit. Like it just came right out of my mouth. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is what I saw. And I described to you, or to her, what I just described to you. As soon as I brought up the photo, black and white, of the young man in the Air Force uniform, her daughter goes, that's grandpa, and head to toe chills. I've never experienced chills like this in my entire life, and instantly my eyes filled with tears. I don't know why I got emotional. I think then I realized, oh my gosh, this is real.
Yeah.
This is real, and I just did this. I'm still in awe by it because that's not something that I've continued to do or has happened since.
And of course you got emotional, because I'm getting emotional just listening to the story. Like, it's such a beautiful story of, number one, you're opening up to mediumship because you 100% are a medium. And just in the short time that we've known each other, I can see it. And this reader saw it. And now you've seen it in this experience. And that's something that's very special. But also you gave a gift to these two women and to the man who is on the other side, right? To finally have somebody who shares that he's still there and he's supporting his loved ones, and he was there at the Reiki, and that's so special.
Yeah, it was. And I think it was the validation that I was able to give this woman, because she couldn't see him, she felt him, and I didn't feel him, I saw him. So just being able to validate for him that, yes, you feeling him is correct.
Yeah.
That was amazing. I've never experienced those feelings before, and that is something I will never forget. And then for it to happen in front of a group of people, everyone witnessed it, and that was so validating too. And I think that really helped with all of the fears that I'd been having, the fear of imposter syndrome that I was having. It helped so much. And then right after I had that experience is when hypnotic arts started. During that class was what, 4 months or something like that. It was a few months long. I went from not being able to feel. I kept saying that, I don't know if I'm empathic. I don't know if I'm picking up on feelings, because in my brain, what something feels like doesn't make sense to me. So I just had a really hard time grasping that until my spirit guide session with you, Stephanie. That was an amazing experience in itself too, because I felt my guides. It was like this warm, glowing hug, and I could feel them on my chest, and it was a good feeling. It was very comforting being able to feel that. And I would always say, I'm not a feeler, I'm a seer, but I felt it. And that's when that started to change for me too. So, throughout this whole period of 3.5 years, I went from being in a very negative headspace and to just be kinder to myself, reduce my stress, which is why I started to meditate, to meditating all the time now, being able to go really deep in meditation. And I've had a lot of other experiences, even through this, when I fall into the depression. And I know this isn't the case for everybody, but for me personally, I always know getting back to meditating helps, because usually when I'm in it, I've gotten away from meditating. I've gotten away from my spiritual practices and care for myself. I'm always able to just climb out of it or start to feel a little bit better at least.
Yeah.
I went from wanting to help people, but not knowing how to help people, being so lost and confused about who I am. This has all been a process of self-discovery, of soul seeking, then going through hypnotic arts with you and the rest of the class. I just feel like that opened me up even more. Through this healing, I learned how to have compassion, which is something, I don't want to say I wasn't a compassionate person before, but certain situations that have happened in my life, I definitely judged the person. And I was able to go back and realize they were going through their own thing and just have compassion, and maybe through that be able to learn to forgive certain things, which is a really hard thing to do. But one thing I learned is that forgiveness isn't for them, it's for us.
Yeah.
And that's powerful.
For sure. I know when I was doing addictions counseling in a day program, so teaching some groups of psychoeducational groups, one thing that I used to say was holding on to grudges is like drinking poison and waiting for the other person to die.
Yes. Oh,
Work that way. So forgiveness is 110% for you, and it has nothing to do with the other person. It has nothing, it's not condoning the action, it's not condoning the experience. It's really just, you know what, I'm choosing to work towards moving forward. Doesn't make it that easy to like just, I'm going to move forward. It's working towards moving forward. And since I've met you, you've been one of the most compassionate people I've ever met. And I felt that way too before, where I didn't feel as compassionate. Well, I had compassion fatigue, where you've heard so many difficult stories, especially in counseling, that you just put a wall up to block yourself from those emotions. And I feel like we all do that, especially, you know, in a situation where you have a narcissistic stepmom, you have some really difficult situations at work, that you have that wall up. I don't see you as ever being anything besides compassionate, especially towards other people.
Well, thank you. Reflecting back on not being able to feel, I think that's contributed to growing up and hiding my emotion as I was growing up in that maybe I just pushed down everything I didn't want to feel. And I think that's why, you know, it was so hard for me to understand, like, what do you mean feel this in my body? Or I don't feel anything. It's because I wouldn't allow myself to feel for so many years.
Yeah. And you know what's interesting that just came up now is you're a Gemini, which is an air sign. And so air signs typically are able to they're very intellectual, or you know, like dealing with the thoughts that are coming in, which is the head, and having your headaches for a year makes a lot of sense that you are holding those emotions within your head space, whereas I'm a Cancer, and Cancers are feelers, not thinkers. Okay, so I'm the opposite of a thinker. I feel everything and I think about almost nothing. So we're the opposites in that scenario. So when it was your spirit guide session, I needed to hear the messages that were coming to you, because I had tried to turn off my feeling sensors for so long that I started feeling a lot of pain within my body. So you were feeling it in your head, and you're an air sign, which is very airy and head-like. And I was feeling it within my body, which is very Cancer-like, and within the body and emotions. So I wonder if when we do our interview with Meredith from Earthling Astrology, if we can maybe ask her, like scientifically or astrology, if that has something to do with it, because other people going through spiritual awakenings might have the same, they might be able to relate to air sign of feeling it within the mind and the head versus a water sign that's feeling it emotionally within the body.
Yeah. That's so interesting. What a good point.
Yeah, honestly didn't think about it, but headaches for a year, that has to be something I've never heard of. So I would love to dive into that a little bit more within hypnosis even, or past life regression, because also I wrote down some notes about a lot of what you said sounds like the witch wound. And I'm about to post some things about that because it exactly what you said, like trouble speaking your mind, people pleasing, the imposter syndrome, hiding your gifts. You're still hiding your gifts a little bit, and as am I, like we're all doing it, but you're a legit medium. It's okay that you don't want to go down that road because it's exhausting, dealing with, but it's also enlightening, just like you experienced in that session. So I wonder, like what might be blocking it. Maybe some trauma happened within a past life, but a lot of witch wound stuff. I also wanted to say, okay, so yellow being your grandmother's favorite color. That is my great grandmother's favorite color. And rather than butterflies, for me, it's yellow roses.
Okay.
It gives me. And China, as your dog, I recently adopted Binks, my pit bull terrier. Her name was China when I adopted her. And I changed the name because I didn't know what kind of life she lived before with that name. So I didn't want to traumatize her anymore. So I changed her name. And the healing pond of chakras, I'm literally creating a hypnosis of a healing pond with the chakra colors of flower petals. Oh, and also the red cardinal is my grandmother's favorite bird.
Oh, wow.
We're just two peas in a pod here. And so, what do you think, besides meditation, do you feel like anything else really helped you through these stages? Whether it's community or taking a walk outside, which I know that you've been doing quite a bit lately, or before the snow is coming?
I mean, I walk every day, and yeah, of course, being outside in nature helps. I live in Wisconsin. We don't always have the nicest winters. When it is nice out, I'm walking outside every day, at least for a little while.
Do you have any other suggestions besides meditation? So, anything else that helped you through the spiritual awakening?
Definitely the podcast helped me so much because it validated everything that was going on in my head, for one thing. Hearing people talk about this stuff openly made me feel like I wasn't alone when I was at a time when I was very isolated. My particular focus, I think, was on just being kind to myself, taking the time I needed, even though I feel like I wasn't very good at it back then, but I am so different now. It's amazing. I look back, especially the last year, so much has changed. I never expected to go through any of this. I never thought my life would be where it is now. It's amazing. I still feel like I don't do things right. I feel like I don't have a morning ritual. I get up and I start work. That's my morning ritual. It's just like you got to find what works for you, I guess. I still meditate, of course. That's something I always come back to. Even if I fall off the wagon or whatever, so to speak, I always go back to it. I don't think I will ever stop meditating in my life. I will always go back to it.
Yeah, and meditating could be for me when I drive to work. I turn my music off and that's my meditation. It's really anything that brings you to that state of a relaxation where you're not focusing on all your life struggles and you're able to focus your mind on something, an intention, or so basically when I get in my car, I ask my guides, I'm using this 40 minutes to receive any and all messages from you. And that's my meditation, because it is really hard for me to sit and meditate at home. I have 3 dogs that are very not well behaved, and it's not possible. If they see me sitting there quietly, they'll stir the pot just because it seems like the right thing to do for them. But I also feel like in this scenario of community, of talking about the struggles that we go through, that in itself is healing. By healing ourselves, we're also healing the overall collective world. Even if they're not listening to this, it's really individual. Like we're all united in some way. Have you received any other signs from the other side, whether it's mediumship or messages from your guides, since becoming more aware of your spiritual gifts?
I feel like I talk to them all the time. That sounds probably weird. I don't know. Being a Gemini, being constantly in my head, unless I'm just talking to myself in my head, it's all day long. I do that a lot.
I don't feel like you're talking to yourself, if I must say.
I don't think I am either because I always say thank you.
Exactly, me too. It sounds like, so there's no, and even for anyone going through a spiritual awakening and you're not sure what is a message and what is your own thoughts, I struggled with that for so long throughout my awakening, and I still do sometimes.
I do too.
Something that I learned is if you really want to get a message, and we talked about this recently, you have to get quiet. So even if it's just 3 breaths while you're standing, if you're at work and you need to take a break, go to the bathroom, go somewhere where you're not going to be disturbed, take those 3 breaths. And the first thing that comes to mind, and it's always going to be something positive if it's a message, trust in that and accept that. And through your spirit guide session, that's exactly what they told you, is trust the impressions that you're getting.
Yeah.
Because we get the messages and then we just, well, it was probably just a thought. It is like, it's not some mysterious voice that pops into your mind. It's really, it feels like a thought sometimes.
Yeah.
Sometimes, for me anyway. Or it feels like something within your body. So one other example for water signs who feel within your body is I used to get like a really upset stomach whenever something bad was about to happen when I was young. That was my intuition telling me, like, you got to get out of here. This is not a good situation. You got to go. And by listening to that, that's trusting your intuition. And as we get older, we learn, I'm not feeling good here. I don't want to be here. I'm leaving. And you trust that impression, and you're assertive enough and confident enough in yourself to just go with that message.
Yeah.
So for a Gemini or an air sign, I think it would be more thought. So for air sign, it's I think. For water sign, it's I feel. And that really helped me understand. So I'm feeling uncomfortable. I'm validating that for myself. I'm removing myself from the situation. That is intuition. We make it seem harder than it is to understand.
Oh, I'm the queen of making it harder than they need to be.
It's unfortunate, but it is true. And now that we have people to talk to, I can message you anytime, which I have many times, of a way that I'm feeling, and you help ground me. And I'm somebody who lives within my emotions, that I have trouble grounding myself. And so finding somebody who you balance each other out is really helpful. But even if you don't have anybody, it's just listening to these podcasts like you suggested, or watching documentaries that really bring your attention, because your guides are going to put these things within your path, because those are your messages. That's what you need to hear. And so trust, if you are going through Netflix and you see something and you're like, oh, I probably wouldn't watch that normally, but I'm going to watch it with the intention to receive the messages that the guide has meant for you to watch that.
What I've noticed is like scrolling through Facebook. So a couple years ago, I went through and I unfollowed a lot of accounts that were very negative or just didn't align with where I was headed. I have a lot of spiritual things and see a lot of spiritual posts, but it's interesting. And I've noticed this for a long time now, that I feel that my guides talk to me through those posts. In a way, it's amazing how I can read one. It resonates to whatever is going on in my life. Not everyone, of course, you have to practice discernment. When it's for me for a certain reason, I always know it. I just know.
And that's it for today's episode. Until next time, stay curious.